Over the past 22 years, the Center Consulting Group has worked with well over 900 organizations, businesses, churches, nonprofits, and they all have something in common that we continually hear. They're looking for that elusive, effective leader. So Dave and Paul, what does an effective leader look like from your perspective? You're senior consultants, you've led organizations, you've worked with hundreds of clients. What do they mean by effective, and what do you think that means?
Well, first of all, they can get things done. When I interview a leader or I talk about a leader, I want to see, have they been able to execute? Have they actually been able to get things done in their organization? Can they move the ball forward? But the second and maybe more important factor is, are there other leaders being created in their wake? If I'm interviewing someone about leadership and most of their stories are about them, about things that they've accomplished and how they are the star of the show, they start to lose my attention pretty quickly, because I'm really interested in a leader who is both effective but can actually create an environment for other leaders to shine.
So they've reproduced,
More
and there's a fruit from what they've produced over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I would say, fit is the most important but elusive characteristic. That's why a coach can go from one team where they're losing to another team and win. There's a cultural piece, and sometimes effective can only be measured if the criteria has been set. What are we trying to do? So when there's ambiguity or a lack of clarity around the mission, it's then back to personality, charisma, perceived success, maybe, rather than real success.
Yeah.
So each of you have given a couple of characteristics. You talked about reproducing leaders. You talked about producing fruit, that there's evidence of their effectiveness. You talked about clarity of direction and vision. Real quick, just throw out some of these effectiveness traits besides the ones you mentioned. Just anything that comes to mind, because I'm curious what you would say.
Yeah. Ownership.
Okay.
Execution. Clarity. Compelling. Collaborative.
Okay. How about you, Dave?
Well, thinking you might actually ask a question based on this subject, I put together a quick list of 10. Accountability, adaptability, confidence, creativity, empathy, integrity or authenticity, resilience or perseverance, ability to inspire and motivate, strong communication skills, a learning mindset, and capacity. So that's a little bit like stew, right? How those get emphasized at different times. But when I'm looking at a leader, if any one of those characteristics is hemorrhaging, then you will have less than an effective leader. And I would say then quickly, nobody has the whole package, right? None of us will ever have all of those that are 10s. But can the organization live with, and is the leader growing in those 10 areas?
Okay, so you listed 10. You listed some that were complementary and some different. Yeah. If we had to look, Jesus doesn't get hired by everybody, right? So we can't find him. So we're dealing with mere mortals. If you had to boil down, I've often thought about this, like if we had to boil down a couple of traits that I find most important, and I know context affects that, but if I had to boil it down to just one or two or three at the most of things you say, my most important are blank, what would you guys say?
Yeah. Well, I would say to your earlier illustration, Jesus wouldn't get hired in a lot of places because he has what they're not looking for, right? And so using him as the optimal example of leadership in that context, character, competency, and chemistry with the rest of the people. And then, I mentioned capacity. That usually grows with a leader in an organization. But coming in, I would say character, competency, and that chemistry piece.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like to juxtapose, I'll say, ownership and stewardship. Ownership is not, it's mine and not a megalomania, but it's that sense of core responsibility that says, this is on my watch when things go well. This is on my watch when things don't go well. One of the measures of, I think, ownership and leadership is when you stumble, make a poor decision, or you made your best decision and it didn't work out well, you still own it. And you own it not just privately, but you own it publicly. One of the things I like to say to young leaders is, unless you're willing to fail publicly and own that failure, you're never going to try something and you're going to hide your mistakes. So you're balancing that, I'll say, radical ownership with that sense of stewardship, which is, I'm not eternal. It never really was mine. And I'm preparing the way for the next person. Stewards really work hard, they invest hard, they delegate well, but they always know they're building for the next person up. And I think that's what protects a leader from that more self-willed narcissistic approach, to be fair.
Yeah, great observations. I mean, in many ways, I often find that context determines everything, right? So a fit on one team does not mean a fit on another. That chemistry piece is truly chemistry. And, I've often felt, and I think we're all similar in the center, who we work with, we pick very carefully, right? And part of it is we don't want to work with anybody that's not going to be a good chemistry fit, no matter what position they're in the center. And I often think about that because you both have worked with organizations where you've seen somebody succeed and somebody fail, and good fit. Jim Collins talks about that. Get the right people on the bus, the metaphorical bus, and so good chemistry. But even when you get good people on the bus, they've got to also be able to deliver the goods, right? There has to be some deliverables, and so I think it probably does go back to that chemistry, competency, character piece that everybody aspires to. Kind of real quick, let me shift gears a little bit because I'm curious. We coach a lot of leaders. What have you been finding to be helpful when you're working with a leader who's not deemed effective by the organization and you're coaching up to move them from less effective to more effective? What are you finding is helpful in that, and what are you finding they're missing?
Oftentimes they're missing clarity. We bring in leaders often hoping that they'll be okay, crossing our fingers, and we hand them a lot. And then when they stumble, we wonder why, or we blame them. And I think we often have to look at ourselves and say, have we given that clarity, the clarity of scope? Is it something that someone can actually own and manage all of it? Dave, you and I have worked with some leaders who've been handed too much, way beyond their capacity. It wasn't a character issue, it's just too much. If a leader's going to grow, I think you build on success. And so you narrow the scope, and there have been leaders we've worked with where we've actually backed off scope. And so let's build on a successful experience, because there's nothing like success to help increase confidence in leadership.
And you're really good at that, Paul, that whole clarity of role, expectations, and good, not that stereotypical performance evaluation, but good performance feedback consistently. You really model that.
Doing that regularly. Once year performance evaluation is just not going to cut it. We believe in at least a good monthly, documented, relational, rigorous stewardship review where a person really, again, owns their scope, owns their decisions, and gets some serious coaching in terms of what are the next steps they can take.
How about you, Dave? What have you found?
Well, I think that part of the question is, were you effective and now have become less effective? So what changed in that formula? Gladwell's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, that sometimes comes into play. The skills that were needed to build that organization or get it to a certain point. And, the student will not grow greater than the master, right? And so sometimes you just run out of your own competency. So the lack of getting extra learning opportunities in front of yourself, taking advantage of that, and there's just so many opportunities to learn even outside of formal education. Somebody that doesn't want to learn eventually will become ineffective. In many organizations, the people that are doing day-to-day operations are being supervised by people who are not doing that. And so they are giving recommendations, and they're trying to bring up competency in an area. Well, because nobody has that whole package, somebody who may be hitting home runs in these 5 areas, it is being diminished by these 3 or 4 areas where they're not. So they can put a lot of energy down here and maybe get to be mediocre, but in turn just bring down competency. So I think we have to say, if you're ineffective because expectations are unrealistic or they're not consistent with who you are as a person in the organization, then you'll have that sense of ineffectiveness when maybe you're not. I would say more times than not, though, you get in that kind of a situation and people lose their passion. They don't have the fire in the belly to go after it the way they used to. And so they begin to lose that cutting edge that just kept the vision going for the organization.
I like the leadership paradigm that's laid out in the Leadership Pipeline book, where there are levels of leadership. It's a bit like Donkey Kong, though, because you rise to a certain level and you're promoted to that next level. Well, guess what? You may have been functioning at a 4 out of 5. You're now going to function at a 2 or a 3 out of 5, and there's a skill set to be learned. What got you there won't get you there, and each time we promote leaders, we have to recognize that for ourselves so that we're not unrealistic, but second, so they don't become discouraged because they need to get more tools in their belt at each level.
Yeah. Yeah, and that book, Marshall Goldsmith's What Got You Here Won't Get You There, he brings up a really interesting point, because he said, basically, we rise up often early on in our profession for technical excellence. But once you reach a certain point, it's no longer the technical excellence. Now it's some of the human dynamic excellence, that relational, emotional intelligence and trust building.
Right.
So
The book, The E-Myth, that technical excellence does not equate to good management, let alone leadership skills.
Yeah.
And there are times you want to unleash the technical folks to really be excellent in that and understand that leadership is its own art, its own skill set, and how can we coach that? One of the things I love about working at the center is we really invest in that sweet spot.
Yeah, and I would say we work with a number of leaders who have been in the organization so long, they have developed this sense of entitlement. And they feel like they've got all the tacit knowledge, all the resources are at their disposal, and it can lead to a downfall.
Well, thank you for your contribution that you make to many, many leaders, and the feedback we receive about the coaching you've provided to helping them become effective, and appreciate that. Well, if we could ever help you in your leadership journey and your organization's leadership journey, we encourage you to visit our website. On our website, you could find enormous resources, including other videos, a number of blogs and other articles that we provide, and it even tells you more about how we partner with organizations to help them become effective.